A very good morning to you all. Welcome to Sunrise Daily. I'm Chamberlain Oso.
Well, it's a beautiful Wednesday morning from here in Lagos, Nigeria. I'm Kairo Kikulu. You're welcome.
I guess the beat goes on for the health sector, especially if you consider the recent commentary coming through from the Minister of Labour, while he says, because doctors, the president of the doctors yesterday had told us that, in fact, he just added to what they were demanding, asking that the ministers of health and labour be relieved of their duties because he thought that they were not pulling the strings, almost as though they were impediment into all of the negotiations, saying, he went on to say that the VP appears to be their only hope in all of these matters, having been designated to head that health sector reform committee, which have a 6-month period within which they've got to do things. But the Minister of Labour, while having that session with Joe Hesu, did say that they are not owing the striking members of the National Association of Resident Doctors that only illegally recruited doctors are the ones who have not been paid because they were recruited illegally. But you know, he eventually said, well, those who were recruited illegally, perhaps their processes will be regularized in due course. But if he then says, look, we're not owing on those doctors, and the doctor says, 114 of us have got to be paid. So it clearly shows it's a deeper divide.
Oh, yes.
So they're not close to being on the same page.
So this meeting lasted till very late last night.
Yep.
And, I mean, the feelers we got from that meeting is that they had reached some sort of resolutions. And as much as that is good news, you might say, I mean, having two parties, right, reaching resolution is a good thing, reaching some sort of agreement. But, you know, I can't help but cast my mind back to how many times I've heard that statement made. We have come to an agreement. We have signed an MOU. We have signed the MOA. There's a third one, which is some sort of agreement that was signed at some point as well, just to show you how far back we've had this thing. But still, this is where we are. Joe Hesu is threatening to go on strike. NMA is threatening to go on strike. NARD is already on strike about almost 40 days now. They've been on strike. And, you know, when you said the beat goes on, I'm thinking this beat is a dirge, really. It's a sad one, honestly, because clearly we have a huge crisis on our hands. I have talked about the sort of manner in which we're approaching this, and a lot of people have lamented over it as well, for a sector as vital as the health sector. So if he says only legally recruited doctors are being owed, so does that mean the 114 that the president spoke about on the gift mix platform, are they the ones that are illegally recruited? I mean, how were they illegally recruited? Because I recall this conversation about who is meant to recruit. Then they're saying that, well, we needed more doctors anyway, and we had to get those doctors. And then it's a back and forth about whether or not you got approval. And they're saying, well, it's a clear problem. We don't have enough doctors. What's the doctor to population ratio in Nigeria? Yeah. It is grossly inadequate. So that debate has been on. So this coming out again, you just wonder, I thought we were close to a resolution. I thought we had an MOU signed. So I honestly don't know. I really don't know. We've had this conversation time and again, but the big one for me is just let's end this.
Yeah, it's something that lots of people just say, oh gosh, Presidential Committee on Salaries. So what's been happening to several meetings? Could these meetings have happened way earlier? And if this meeting is with Joe Hesu, is there going to be another one with what? NMA? NARD?
I think NMA's meeting is next week.
And so what about that health sector reform committee? So are they going to be working independent of this? Because there will be salary issues related to the health sector reform committee.
And I wonder too, just pardon me, how much they can take on in 6 months.
And make recommendations.
Oh, yes, because they have to go back, I think, 2 decades or thereabouts, the kind of measures that we're taking. Wow. But it's quite good, definitely. I mean, looking at the composition of that committee, you'd have states, the FCT, you have health professionals, you have some other bodies, too, that have been a part of this process, monitoring, as it were. So, yes, it's good, but...
because remember, the SGF did say at the time, before the National Assembly members, that They didn't know that the health sector was this bad.
Oh, yes.
So maybe that informed the health sector reform committee. And if they come up with their recommendations, well, can they? Because if they're going back that far, yeah, well, certainly, government is a continuum, they say. But it's going to be important, the very first few steps that they take on this one. Makwa?
Well, we'll certainly be monitoring what it is that will be done in the health sector. You just made reference now to the Vice President heading the Health Sector Reform Committee. I remember reading somewhere yesterday, some people saying, isn't the Vice President too saddled? I mean, considering the fact that he has a few other, committees that he's chairing as well. But I want to think that, he can take it in his stride, and that this is something that is extremely important. When COVID-19 did break out, a number of people thought, and how it challenged our health sector, a number of people did think that it was an opportunity for us to, get things right in our healthcare sector. We've neglected the sector for way too long. Don't forget that Bill Gates was in Nigeria a few years ago, and he was hosted at the Villa, where he was talking about the importance of the federal government focusing on health, focusing on education, and I think there was one other sector which he mentioned now. He believes that that is the tripod for development. And not too long after he spoke, COVID-19 broke out. And, what he was saying eventually came to the fore. And as you did rightly recall, Chamberlain, that question, the message which the SGF did say at some point, that we didn't know that our healthcare sector was this bad. This was just on a tour of government hospitals. And I think a big question is what has changed since he made that statement in terms of welfare for the personnel who man the hospitals, and even, in terms of infrastructure for the hospital as well. Just this morning, listening to radio on my way here, listening to the headlines being read, a few callers called in, and the messages that they had was heart-rending. I mean, in terms of the people who need to see the doctors in government hospitals. These are the kinds of things that push people to quacks. Because when people are not able to, when government hospitals are not available and they're inaccessible, you now find a situation whereby people now go to private hospitals, in quotes, that they can afford. And oftentimes, when it gets that low, you might find out that you're not actually dealing with professionals, you're dealing with quacks. So we have really put the lives of our people in serious jeopardy with this prolonged strike that doesn't have a solution. And the aggressive stance of government really needs to, change. Let us hope that that some trust will come back to the negotiating table, because what has broken down now is trust. The fact that, we had an agreement, it was breached, we go on strike to enforce it, and then, you meet all manner of obstacles. I want to believe that egos, should be set aside at this point, and that the plight of the people who government and, of course, the doctors who are on Hippocratic oath to preserve would reign supreme, will be paramount to both parties at this point. But, gentlemen, considering all that we have before us, 21-day ultimatum, which NMA has given, also in solidarity with NARD, they're hoping that they will not exhaust that 21-day ultimatum before solutions come. Let us be hopeful as well that before the 21 days expire, that we should be seeing some action which will see our doctors back at work. And not just doctors, but also other medical workers. Gentlemen.
Well, yes, indeed, that's what everyone looks forward to. But that said, we'll just go ahead, delve into some of the dailies here today and take you through what it is that they reflect. All right, let's take you through that. We'll start with Nigerian Tribune today. Zamfara gunmen are terrorists, not bandits. Straight up from Governor Rotimi Akeredolu, as you see ascribed to him there. End selective abductions, killings in Northeast, North Central. Buhari charges security chiefs. So if you're in doubt, make do with this. That's what he's telling us. He's not the first governor to have said this anyway. I do remember that the chairman of the NGF himself, at the time he visited Niger State to commiserate with the state over some of the kidnaps that had happened there. He said, look, let's be clear about some of these things. These are remnant of those Boko Haram terrorists who have spread and moved. Yes, they moved down here. So if anybody wants to play the ostrich, good luck. But there he's another governor saying the same thing. So there you go. That image you see there is Osun State Governor, Mr. Adegboyega Oyetola, with the Amotekun Corps Field Commander during the passing out parade of 360 pioneer Amotekun Corps operatives at Wole Soyinka Government High School, Ejigbo, on Tuesday. The paper so captions that one. So there you go. Take a look at the back page as well. World Cup qualifier, Osimhen scores as Eagles beat Cape Verde 2-1. I told you that every team always have a plan until they concede. Remember yesterday they said, we're sure that we'll beat Eagles. You can't blame them. They have to do that to give themselves some sort of hope. You know, when you go for at the time when COVID broke and there were so many theories, then there was this false positive sometimes. That was a false positive response on the part of Cape Verde.
They actually planned to win, really. I mean, if the coin was flipped, because the second goal was an own goal. So it was a goal meant for against Nigeria, but, you know, it went the other way. So they planned to win, but they didn't score in the right goal post. So that's what happened yesterday. But good one. A win is a win.
Victory is always good. You know, when you win, you can say all sorts of things. So, oh yeah, we'll plan to do this, we'll plan this, and it went according to the plan. And sometimes you don't want to be humble in victory, but you know what you go through. But yeah, good to see the Eagles, winning the game.
Absolutely, top of that group now. But let's take a look at Vanguard newspaper for you. The lead story is on insecurity, and you see, act fast, Nigerians living in fear. Let me take that again. Act fast, Nigerians living in fear. That's according to Akeredolu. It's a page 5 read, but take a look at the riders as well. I regret granting bandits amnesty, Masari. Gunmen kidnap ex-Katsina State Television GM daughter. Asks president to restore people's hope, make Nigeria livable. Insists open grazing now illegal. Buhari orders security chiefs to end selective abductions, killings in northeast, north central. Bandits becoming a nuisance Nigerians believe were incapable, says defense minister. So different things from different people right there as the lead on the front page of the Vanguard newspaper. But right under the big picture you see there, by the way, that big picture shows a reconciliation meeting to reconcile warring groups in Just Crisis in Plateau State yesterday. So some good news coming from that angle, and we do hope that this holds for the nearest, in fact, the longest future, if I could say that. But right under that picture, you see Imo government shuts banks over IPOB sit at home. PDP governors meet over NWC offices. NEC meeting holds tomorrow. I'm just taking all that under that big picture. And then Igbo's aide, DSS will damage Nigeria's reputation by flouting court orders. That's coming from his lawyer. So quite a number of stories packed into that one. Of course, there's Mr. and Mrs. I'll let you go through that one. And back page, of course, has sports. Super Eagles beat Blue Sharks of Cape Verde in Mindelo. Pocket 20 million naira from Airpeace boss. I see Vanguard Sports didn't forget that, because it was in the news yesterday.
Oh dear.
That's Vanguard newspaper this morning.
Well, let's take a look at Daily Trust for you. And this is what you find on the front page. Many schools shut as insecurity disrupts learning in 4 states. Bandits convert classrooms to restrooms in Zamfara. I mean, the disdain for education. Look at that. Bandits convert classrooms to restrooms. In other words, they convert them to toilets in Zamfara. Uncertainty in Katsina, Kaduna, Niger redeploys boarding students. We must salvage our children. That's from experts. To press home the story, well, here on the front page of the Daily Trust in Abuja, we have empty classrooms. So it looks like we have 2 different pictures on the front page of Daily Trust this morning. Look at this one. VAT, Gombe asks Lagos Rivers to reconsider stance. Okay, the page 6 read for you. Are they going to find a political solution to the court ruling? I don't know, but you might want to see the story on page 6 of the paper. Take a look at this. 9 months after inauguration, Obaseki yet to appoint commissioners. We don't need NCC approval for e-transmission of results. That's according to INEC. And Buhari to service chiefs and selective abductions, killings. It's a page 4 read. You have a number of other stories at the bottom there. PDP governors decide Secondus's fate today. Federal agency director commits suicide in Abuja. Commit suicide is in parenthesis there. Perhaps there is suspicion around the manner of that. It looks like suicide, but it might not be. You might want to see details on page 4. And Taliban forms government in Afghanistan. Those are the lead stories on the front page of the Daily Trust this morning. Let's leave it there for the paper.
Well, let's take a look at The Guardian next. NSA absent as service chiefs get fresh order to end killings. Nigeria takes delivery of another batch of Super Tucano jets next week. Terrorists in Zamfara being clothed as bandits, says Akeredolu. So it's about time. We'll take off the garb and hit the nail on the head. I think it's also trying to say, call a spade, not an agricultural implement. Well, just beneath that one, you get to see Lagos Fiber Project to gulp 82 billion naira amid right-of-way charges concerns. Uncompleted fiber pipes deface Lagos roads. LASG pegs ROW charges at 796 naira per linear meter. Okay, and you see here they say operators seek further slash so as you allow, affordability, because those charges can impact. You're going to get an overall impact in the cost of the output. And then MTN Airtel key into duct pipes, lease 2,100 kilometers of fiber. So there's huge potential in that sector. But, if they're asking for further slash, then they've got their reason. So you might as well just pick up that story and check that out. Yes, INEC is insisting on e-transmission of results without recourse to NCC. So I know, way to go, isn't it? Many might think. So there you go.
Because it's instructive. INEC did not attend that, during the National Assembly debate. INEC did not come. It was meant to be INEC and NCC, right? Mm-hmm. But INEC did not show up. As though said, we have made our position known. You know what we're here for, what we want to do. So perhaps...
And it's not electronic voting. After the vote has been done, it's just whatever has been announced there. You just send that all you're saying. So there's a paper deal.
There's a paper version as well. But you know what?
Yeah.
The Daily Times newspaper is next. The paper, that is. FG not owing any doctor monthly salary in Gige. So yes, again, you see that one. Accuses NARD of trying to use strike to arm twist government to accept illegally recruited doctors. NARD demands sack of Labour Health Ministers, hopes on Osinbajo to resolve crisis. We did have that conversation with the president yesterday, and he was quite vehement with that demand. So that's what you have as a lead on the front page of the Daily Times newspaper. And you see this one, still on health, right? Panic as cholera outbreak hits Oyo, Ogun. And when Malkwe spoke about, people approaching quacks because they don't have access to doctors, in government hospitals. One of the outbreaks in Ogun State, which they're calling gastroenteritis, was as a result of those people going to quacks. So that's a pointer to the dangers or the crisis we're going through right now. So it's a major one, really. And you see, open grazing bill, Mieti Allah demands 750,000 hectares of land for ranching in Delta. So that's at the bottom strip of the Daily Times newspaper this morning.
Which Mieti Allah, I think, is the question, because we do know that there are two factions. There's Mieti Allah, and there's Mieti Allah Kautahori. which is the one that is threatening to go to court. So you might want to read inside the paper to see which one of the Miyetti Allahs they're referring to. But leadership is the next one here, and you see what they have on the front page for you. 2023 permutation changes as North Central lobbies APC, PDP for tickets. Says region should produce next president for fairness, equity and justice. Disowns politicians from North Central seeking party national chairmanship positions. So that's the lead story they have on their front page. It's very heavy on politics. You might want to read details on page 4. Again, PMB orders security chiefs to end abductions, killings. Bandits abduct 18 in Kaduna. It's a page 4 read. And you also have this one. NAS can't legislate on grazing. That's from SANs. That story is a fallout of so you're already seeing those who should know, senior advocates of Nigeria weighing in and saying no, NAS can't legislate on grazing. Look at this one. Sell $900 billion dead assets, federal government urged. And you might want to read this one. Ned Woko tackles governors over $418 million Paris Club refund. $418 million. I hope I qualify that. Paris Club refund. So you're aware of the controversy, and it looks like one of the creditors is not keeping quiet. You might want to read details on page 6. Domesticate Child Rights Act now, Sultan tells Northern Governor. It's very specific. It's just one governor. You might want to read who the governor is on page 7 of Leadership this morning. Let's leave it there.
News Direct is next one, and take a look at what they talk about. Strike. Only illegally recruited doctors excluded from monthly salary ascribed to the federal government there. And then the writer says, strikes truce with Johesu. Sounds good, doesn't it? As NMA calls on NEC, others to prevent sector collapse. Yeah, clearly we can't afford that in this country if they don't intervene. So you'll be hoping that they all intervene sooner rather than later. So that is News Direct this morning, which brings an end to a look at some of the dailies here today. We're back in a moment. Stay with us.
The Rivers State government and the Federal Inland Revenue Service have been locked in a legal tussle over the right to collect certain taxes, especially the value-added tax and personal income tax. The Attorney General of Rivers State in 2020 instituted a suit at the Federal High Court in Port Harcourt to challenge the right of the federal government through the Federal Inland Revenue Service to collect VAT and other taxes. On August the 9th, 2021, the court presided over by Justice Stephen Daylor Palm delivered a judgment in favor of the Rivers State government. Not backing down, the FIRS filed an application to stop the enforcement of the judgment pending the outcome of a suit on appeal, but the same court refused the application.
The issue of collection of VAT, as it were, as it stands today, the Rivers State government is still entitled to so collect. That's where we are today.
For sure, we feel that the ruling should have gone in our favor, but the court has taken a position against us, so we'll do the needful by taking it up immediately before the Court of Appeal.
To stop the continuing breach, denial.
Following the court judgment, Governor Nyesom Wike at a media briefing directs the State Revenue Service to ensure immediate implementation of the tax laws and describes as ill-advised the action by the FIRS.
Today's judgment, the way is not clear for the administration and enforcement of the Rivers State Value-Added Tax Law 2021 across the entire state until otherwise decided and set aside by the superior courts. Consequently, I hereby direct the Rivers State Revenue Service Board to ensure the full and total implementation and enforcement of this law against all corporate bodies, business entities, and individuals with immediate effect.
The governor explores the opportunity to address residents on the ravaging COVID-19 infections while justifying his decision to demolish shanties in the state to curb insecurity.
I therefore appeal to all residents to help protect yourself, your loved ones, and the rest of the citizens by getting your vaccination at the designated health centers in the state. Finally, we will not rest until we clear the state of all shanties wherever they are located and restore sanity to our environment and achieve a better sense of comfort and security for everyone.
The Rivers State government says it is determined to protect the interest of the state through every constitutional means.
Welcome back. That is what we're talking about today. We've got Dr. Jerome Okolo, who is a tax law expert. He joins us via Zoom from Enugu. Good morning, and thank you for joining us today on the program. Well, yeah, much as we've seen this decision at the moment, even though the FRS says we'll take it higher, we'll go up and challenge that further and see what happens. But the Rivers State government themselves directing the state officials to ensure full compliance. Could you tell us, what is the thinking in your professional circle about what is going on at the moment? Are you there, Dr. Kolo? Can you hear me? Okay, we'll try and get that connection sorted, then they'll come back to you on this one. So, well, clearly, this typology of a tug of war going on, and so you really like to just find out, look, because the statement coming through from FRS will equally give people some concern, say, well, haven't read from them, and then this decision, both parties giving, both authorities giving directives, so clearly, you just wonder. You just have to.
Honestly, I wonder what yesterday would have been like for businesses in Rivers State, thinking, who do we pay to? I mean, so what's the thinking? I imagine the legal department of different companies coming together and trying to look at the judgment, they look at the statement, they look at the laws and think, where do we stand? And like we said, that's not good for business, which is why it's good to have the proper perspective on these things so people can make the right decision. But then what is status quo in this state, as it were?
That's the thing with lawyers. They give us different perspective on all of this matters. So I think we've got Dr. Jerome Okolo back on the line. Dr. Jerome, good morning again, and thank you for joining us today on the program. So could you go ahead and tell us what the thinking is in your professional circle about what is going on at the moment?
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here with you. First of all, I will commend the Federal Inland Revenue Service for doing the right thing, which is taking up the judgment on appeal. But addressing the issue from the legal point of view, I would say that there have been several legislative arrows pointing at the value-added tax, too many legislative arrows of the law, statutory law, had been pointing at value-added tax. But what happened now is that the hand of the judiciary now drove the edges of those arrows right into the heart, as consistently driving the arrows right into the heart of value-added tax. So value-added tax has a very weak legislative foundation, and that is just being exposed by the judgment, the recent judgments of the courts addressing the legislative shortfalls, legislative weaknesses of the value-added tax. You go to constitutional foundation, which is the substratum, the ground for any law to stand and survive. The VAT Act, which is a law on value-added tax, does not have a good constitutional foundation, because the power of the federal government is a law made by the National Assembly. The power of the National Assembly to make law is derived from the exclusive legislative list or the concurrent list, where it will override laws of the state government. If it is not from either of these two lists, then it will go to the residual list. Then a law that does not derive force from those lists can only derive force again from Section 315 of the Constitution. That is existing law. But there are two arms of Section 315. 315 subsection 1, which is generally for all the laws existing before 1999 when democracy came into force. But the laws that are deriving force from 315 subsection 1 must also adhere to the condition of the legislative list, which the Value Added Tax Act does not again. So if you look at section 315 subsection 5, the laws that are sacred cows that don't require any condition to survive are the ones specifically listed in section 315 subsection 5, like the Land Use Act and the NYSC Act. Value Added Tax also does not have a place there. So it will take an interpretation of the Constitution that may not be the regular mode of interpretation for the Value Added Tax Act to see the light of the day and for the power of the federal government to tax VAT to be restored. But the situation as it is now, there is an appeal and the state of execution. An appeal does not operate as state of execution. An application by federal government to stay execution of that judgment has been dismissed. So as it is now, the judgment of the Rivers State, the Federal High Court, Port Harcourt Division, sitting in Port Harcourt, Rivers State, is the law as it is now. But because of the troubles, the confusion that will be setting in the camp of the taxpayers if there is implementation of the value-added tax, I will advise that it be put in abeyance and then the process of the appeal up to the Supreme Court be hastened with the same accelerated hearing that electoral cases are accorded, so that it will be settled very, very soon, and then taxpayers would now be very clear on which tax authority to direct their VAT compliance on. Thank you.
We'll talk about that a little bit more, but if I could just backtrack a little bit and go down memory lane. Now, if that VAT Act of 2007 is doesn't have a very strong foundation on a shaky ground, so when Lagos State government took the federal government to court about centralization of this VAT in 2014, and Supreme Court ruling we don't have original jurisdiction in this matter. So if the state government had at that time gone back, started perhaps approached it the way Rivers did, does that suggest then that they might have had a case?
Yes, of course. They might have had it because the law as it was in respect of VAT and that 2014 is still the law as it is now and as it was when the Federal High Court in Rivers State decided the matter. So they would have had a case. They would have had a victory of Lagos State would have had a victory of Rivers State if they had come back to the Federal High Court the moment the Supreme Court said they had no jurisdiction. The only reason the Supreme Court declined jurisdiction then was that it said, by the Constitution, our original jurisdiction can only be invoked if the conflict is between the federal government itself and the state government. But what we have before us is an agency of the federal government and a state government, not the federal government itself. So we don't have jurisdiction. So if Lagos State had taken a cue from that and gone to the federal High Court as at then, I would say that what just happened in Rivers State by the Federal High Court would have also been the case then in 2014.
So earlier on, just before you came on, we were trying to put ourselves in the shoes of businesses. You have touched on it, but maybe not quite as clearly as I would want as to what the situation is right now. So you say that as it stands, with that court judgment, companies are meant to, or VAT is meant to be collected by the River State government. Am I right?
Yes.
But you also went on to say it should be put in abeyance.
That is strictly going by the law, because with the stay of application for stay of execution dismissed now, it means there is nothing in the way of the Rivers State government to enforce the law it just enacted or the value-added tax law. There is nothing in the way because by tried principle of law, an appeal does not on its own constitute a stay of execution. That's the law. But for ideal management of the tax and in fairness to the taxpayers, my advice is that while VAT enforcement is put in abeyance, put on hold by both the federal government and the state government, the appeals, both from the Court of Appeal and ultimately in the Supreme Court, should be given accelerated hearing. We see the speed of electoral matters, election matters compared to other matters. So they will even accord it speedier dispensation in resolving the matter, not just at the Court of Appeal, express movement to the Supreme Court, and then finally the matter is laid to rest by the Supreme Court. So my advice is that if the tax be put in abeyance for now, and then the appeal processes be sped up.
So, Dr. Okoro, does the law recognize this abeyance, this your view? Because, I mean, when the chips are down, I imagine in the coming months or years, when these things are reviewed, they'll look at how well people actually adhered to the laws or the judgment. So this abeyance, can it hold water in the future? Because, like you said, the judgment is quite clear. So how will the abeyance play out when the judgment is clear, says the state should collect VAT?
Yes, as I said, the right of the state is well spelled out now, and there is no stumbling block to that right. I am just considering the plight of taxpayers who would be at a loss, going strictly by the judicial development as it stands. Stay of execution being dismissed, only an appeal pending. The states are right to enforce the laws that's the state that have the laws, like Rivers State that enacted the law. They have the right to enforce the laws. But I'm looking at a situation where nobody can tell the Court of Appeal or the Supreme Court says otherwise. What then happens? Ideally, what will happen is that before that judgment of the Supreme Court comes, the states will have been right to enforce their own laws before then. That is what will happen. Yes, but just for what it is worth, the laws be put in abeyance until it is ultimately decided. That is just a personal advice from one who cares for taxpayers. Not that I'm strictly speaking the terms of the law. The terms
we get that.
Now, states can enforce.
So,
states can enforce on here.
The thing about that now, that suggestion is this. The states wants to go ahead and collect this. That's why they went to court in the first place. FIRS challenge it because they don't want that to happen. So if they put it in abeyance, who's going to keep collecting it? Does that mean no tax will be paid at the moment? Is that a sort of tax holiday? What will then be the situation playing out if that were to happen?
Okay, if it's put in abeyance, if the right of the state is ultimately upheld at the Supreme Court, it would have been a backlog of that right. Then there are still concessions in tax payments. There are still concessions in tax payments, like we know about VAT, that's the voluntary asset and income declaration concession incentive given by the Federal Inland Revenue Service at a point. And that is why I also advise that the appellate process be given accelerated hearing. Let it just be a matter of days, of weeks, if not days. So that period, VAT compliance is on monthly basis. It wouldn't have been a long time. So that if the right of the state is then ultimately upheld at the Court of Appeal, it will have been that it is their right in backlog to have collected VAT within that period. Then it will now become a situation of a negotiation with the taxpayers, the businesses, because VAT is collected through the businesses, not paid directly by the consumers of the VATable, the taxable goods and services. So okay, my proposal is just in fairness to the taxpayers.
So that means that the consumers will still keep paying VAT, but the companies will hold off on who to remit that VAT to.
Oh yes. There will still be VAT compliance. The VAT is of monthly compliance, It is the businesses that will collect the VAT. Their expenses in the course of putting together their goods and services is input VAT. That's they pay VAT when they buy the items that they use to produce their goods or effect their services. That VAT that they pay out is their input VAT. Then when they render the service or supply the goods, then the VAT that they charge on the goods is output VAT. What is remitted to tax authority is the excess of the output VAT over input VAT. So the businesses will still be the stop point of VAT. They collect output VAT, deduct their input, and then the VAT that is due for remittance to a government, it can still be held on for the 1 or 2 months. If my proposal for accelerated hearing is adhered to, then they remit it.
Well, the thing is
the business
at the moment, there isn't any rule, or I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, that is going to happen or that it will be given that accelerated hearing. And then secondly, does that then suggest that if that negotiation is going to happen, it is going to be with those who are holding onto the tax for final remittance to the government? So if anybody will benefit, it won't be maybe regular people like us who pay that regularly. Is that what that means?
That's what that means. That's what that means. Wow. Because, well, yes, that's what that means. Because
that's tough to take.
Most of what I can say now is derived from the Value Added Tax Act, the federal law that is under the sword of Damocles now, is facing the danger of elimination now. Yes, so I don't really know what the details of the state laws, the various state laws, their VAT laws is going to be in terms of a percentage of value-added tax payment. It may differ from what the federal law proposes. The mode of remittance, the time of compliance may also differ. Yes, so that's why I am looking at a situation of compliance that will not strictly go by the law, so that it will be easy for the taxpayers.
Excuse me. Well, you have already said that the state government, beg your pardon, that the people who will pay the tax will be paying it anyway. That's the consumers of goods and products that already have this value-added tax added to them will still be paying the products. What you're suggesting is that the companies, the businesses withhold remitting tax. Isn't that criminal?
Well, withholding remitting, withholding the remitted taxes, going by the law, yes, there is a penalty for it. It should not be. But when there is a situation that is not completely attuned to the law, that concession is to be made, then such concessions will be necessary. That's why in going by the law, we look at social circumstances. We look at social circumstances. When VAT, the voluntary asset and income declaration regime, was on, so what it was meant to waive off would have been criminal. But then no one will say that a law, maybe a state law that has just been passed, people are not so familiar with it, and then you are trying your best with compliance, and then the Supreme Court decides that one has offended the law. We have to do some compromise when it comes to the letters of the law in a situation like this. We also look at the circumstance where maybe the Supreme Court decides that this is the right of the federal government through the Federal Inland Revenue Service. What then happens? So it is a two-way thing.
Some people will argue that there is no ambiguity here, that what has happened is very clear. Judgment has been given for those who have approached, the FRS has approached the court for a stay of execution that has been denied. So there is no ambiguity here. What the situation is that they have gone to the Court of Appeal to state their case. Now, while that is on, it's like saying that when the case was in court, when the River State government took the matter to court, people should have withheld paying taxes, or, you know, businesses should have withheld remitting the taxes because the River State government was in court with FRS. Isn't that wrong?
I said, you said no ambiguity, and I agree with you, and I made a point that there is no ambiguity. The coast is very, very clear for Rivers State government. Yes, what I asked for would be in the place of Rivers State government to grant, if they are so inclined. If they are so inclined. But if they are not so inclined, there's nothing anybody can do about it because the law favors them. Yes, I only made a passionate appeal that, see, look at all the ways that it will be possible to make it easy for the taxpayers. But beside that, strictly speaking, under the law is clear, there is no ambiguity, and I made this point at the very beginning, that it is the right of states now, is the right of River States now. They have this motion for stay of execution has been taken off the way. The judgment in force today is in their favor. So any concession that can be made through a circular, through an executive order, has to come from the River State government. But if they are not so inclined, then nothing stops them. There's nothing anybody can do to push them against exercising their right as it stands now.
Okay, so what do you think, though? I mean, why do you think this is so contentious? Because we've seen that, well, the River State government has gone to court to challenge it. The states say, you know, the VAT is collected in their state. What is under contention is who has the right to collect taxes. The Federal High Court or the High Court has ruled in favor of the states because by extension, giving it to River State has by extension extended to all the states. And we see a number of states now, you know, enacting laws to be able to collect VAT in their states. The FIRS is approaching the Court of Appeal to challenge this. Why do you think it's important to them when, at the end of the day, when this comes to the common ports, the states where this VAT is collected still get at least 75% of what is collected in general? Why do you think that they're challenging this?
Okay, the states get 50% of what is collected in general. The gross, the entire collection of the VAT by the Federal Inland Revenue Service before this judgment was delivered was shared in the percentages, the ratio of 15% to the federal government, 50% to all the states, and then 35% to the local governments. But why the contention, the toss over the power to collect VAT now, why it's so controversial is that some states are agitating. They are aggrieved that the bulk of the VAT realized because of the bulk of trade, the businesses that go on, the consumer-based businesses that go on in their state, it far outweighs those of the collection from other states. But when the 50% going to the state is shared, it is split in equal ratio to all the states. So some states feel cheated that we have spent money to enable business environment, to enable the consumption of certain products in our domain. Whereas such products, they are not given a chance to thrive in other states. But when these products are subjected to VAT and the VAT is realized, all those states that have not enabled the thriving of such businesses that are not friendly to those products will also get an equal share from these products. We are not giving any special concession. The share of the 50% going to the state is not on the basis of derivation from the state. So that is the grievance. That's the grievance. But as it is the law supports the states that are so agitating.
That is the grievance of the states. What I'm saying is, what is the grievance of the FIRS in this? Okay, the grievance of the FIRS is that, first of all, the federal government that the Federal Inland Revenue Service is representing is entitled to 15%. When it is collected, the tax is collected by the federal government. But if it is collected by the state, now there will be no remittance to the federal post. In other words, that share that goes to the federal government will not be there. So the federal government will lose out in that.
Yes. Then on the practicality of or practicability of the tax, enforcement of the tax, there are some aspects of value-added tax, like tax on international tax on imported services, tax on exported services is exempted. VAT is exempted on exported services, but imported services, they're subjected to tax. Imported services, you are receiving service from an outside source, is the Federal Inland Revenue Service that subjects it to value-added tax. So that the mode of enforcement, ensuring compliance by the foreign entity, may not be feasible for states because they don't have such international machinery to put that in place. So much of the VAT will be lost. So if positively, that's one of the grievances of the Federal Inland Revenue Service. But the major grievance is even the little that goes to federal government will be lost, which is 15%, will be lost. Everything will end with the states now if the power of enforcement is considered to the states only.
So I think a lot of people can better understand the FIRS's position. I mean, because this is 50%, yes, might seem small, but that's something, right, compared to nothing. So that's, part of the argument of the FIRS, even in court, saying that, well, we weren't even getting much in the first place. We were getting 15%, while the states were getting a huge chunk, and the local government's getting 35%. So that was part of the argument. Another side was saying that, the National Assembly has expansive powers to, make legislations on taxes. And, of course, the Constitution should also be interpreted from that perspective. And one of those legislations is VAT Act, which came out of the Finance Act. So what becomes of that if this status quo, as it is now, as you have also referenced, is maintained?
Okay. As I said from the beginning, several legislative arrows we are pointing at the VAT Act. What the judiciary, what the courts are doing now is consistently driving those arrows into the very heart of the VAT Act. When I say legislative arrows, I mean legislative witnesses. You cited the VAT Act, you cited the Finance Act. These are laws made by the National Assembly. And the law made by either the National Assembly or State Assembly derives its life from the Constitution. I made that analysis that if you look at the legislative list, the taxes that are to be legislated upon by the federal government is itemized in items 58 and 59 of the schedule to the legislative list. That is taxes on income, profits, and capital gains, and then stamp duties. But VAT is not one of them. Then if a law fails that test, then it can only survive if it's under existing laws in section 315. And 315 subsection 5 outlines the specific laws that are sacred cows, like the Land Use Act and the NYSC Act. The other laws that must derive life from section 315 must also conform with the list. VAT Act does not. And so that is why the VAT Act is being consistently declared unconstitutional, not just in this judgment by Rivers State and FIRS. In another judgment, even Chukwuka, Okala, and FIRS, though that's an individual taxpayer, the Federal High Court had already decided that VAT Act has no place in the Constitution. The other law it will have derived life from is the Taxes and Levies Approved List for Collection Act. But again, the court in Uyo Local Government Council and Akwa Ibom State Government ruled that Tax and Levies Act, because it said, notwithstanding what is in the Constitution, it sort of places itself above the Constitution, that law has no force, no ground to stand on.
Okay, so if I could just come in, pardon me, Doctor, if I could just quickly butt in. So if you're saying that it renders the VAT Act unconstitutional, so what percentage has to be paid then? Is it the 7.5% that is in the VAT Act? Is it 5%? Or states are at liberty to say, you know what, for my states, let's do 20% or 15%? Yes.
Unfortunately, that's the case. If state says you are remitting 20%, 30%, 50% of the cost of goods or services, then that's how it will be. And one state can say 50%, another state will say 2%. One
Doesn't
state
that,
can say 5%.
if that's going to be operationalized, does it then mean that if you're coming from one state that maybe you pay 5%, like to be nice at that, if you pay 5% in a particular state and you get to another state, and if theirs is about 7%, you pay. That's what's going to happen?
No, this argument has been put up. I think there are some of the governors raised this argument that for goods in transit, that it will be suffering VAT at all the stop points from the point it leaves to. But VAT, both internationally, worldwide, and in most jurisdictions anyway, what is practiced here, what the culture of VAT here is the destination principle of VAT that makes VAT liable to tax at the point of consumption. It is where the goods or services supplied that VAT is charged. So if you are transporting VATable goods or you are moving to render VATable service, you are not liable to VAT at any point. That is not VAT. They can save any other pay, but it is that destination where you will supply the goods or service that there will be no double taxation, no taxation of VAT in one state and still the same product is subjected to VAT in another VAT.
All right, Dr. Jerome Okolo, tax law expert and managing partner, Tetralex Legal and Advisory. Thank you very much indeed for your perspective this morning.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, so already we've seen several reports and objections raised by some governors. In fact, just this morning we're reading where Gombe, the Commissioner for Finance, was just saying, look, Lagos, Rivers, or Southern States, he says, need to reconsider because of the impact this will have on some of the other states. In fact, some of the words he used was put sentiment aside and be brotherly. But in terms of the implications of this, what does this mean? How will this play out? What do you see happening? We've got Booker Carey, who is a former chairman of the Nigeria Economic Summit Group, who joins us this morning. Good morning, and thank you for joining us today on the program. This will have huge implications if it were to be upheld by the Supreme Court as it stands today. So from your perspective, I mean, I know that NESG has several papers and documents about what to do to revamp the economy. What do you see playing out should this be upheld?
Good morning, Chamberlain. This is basically my personal observation and points of view. I think NESG had always been at the forefront of recommending policies that would enhance and grow the economy. But this is something that I believe can be touched from the point of view of how is the impact of the actions of at least Rivers and to a lesser extent Lagos State would affect the overall economy. First of all, VAT collections, constitutionally speaking, I do not have the professional constitutional knowledge. Therefore, I will leave that to the lawyers to adjudicate. The matter has gone to courts. What I can say, though, is that if the VAT generated in each state were to be collected by the states rather than a federal law that I believe, is where the federal government is using to stand to take the matter to court, then there would be many repercussions. First of all, what would happen to every goods that are imported into the country? And if they are imported into the country from, say, Apapa Port, would I then say, as Lagos State, that value is being added by virtue of it being lifted from a port that is in my jurisdiction, or is it only for products and services that are created within the Lagos environment? So there are many elements that need to be looked at. But the implications for states is that states that have a lot of economic activity, and here I would probably put Lagos, Rivers, maybe to a lesser extent, Oyo, maybe Ogun, which is a neighboring state, Kano, possibly Kaduna, may have an upper hand vis-a-vis the other states. But that's actually the bane of a republic. If we are going to be a republican democracy, then the federating units have to fend for themselves. Now, the idea of going to Abuja to collect monthly allocations may actually begin to decrease, if you will, because if you are having a larger portion of your revenues as a state from IGR, for example, Lagos again is a case in point, and to a lesser extent even Rivers, then you begin to assert what you claim or what you believe is your right. Now, that would then be tested up to the Supreme Court. And of course, the impact then would be state governors need to wake up to the reality that, you know, it's not the old the old method of coming to Abuja every month to collect subventions or allocations.
Just all right. We'll go to break now, but we'll be back and take a look at some more perspective in terms of what other scenarios could possibly play out in just a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back. Well, let me be a little hypothetical. Now, if in the event that perhaps the judgment doesn't go in the way of Rivers, perhaps at the Supreme Court or the Court of Appeal, do you think that this would have sufficiently raised that consciousness and brought back that debate saying, look, the country needs to have another conversation about revenue allocation and resource management in different states?
Indeed, yes. If this were to, let's say, fail in the Supreme Court, and we go back to the original stance, then what will happen is that the conversation will continue. I know that there is also a lot of discussions about changes that people would want to see in the Constitution itself. Because if we are to be a republic or Republican democracy, then what would happen is that the federating units, in this case the states, may have to determine their fate, so to speak. But the other larger issue is actually what people say, either called revenue allocation or formula or whatever. But the key aspect of this discussion is that things are not going to remain the same. Things may change. And some people, including myself, believe that we just have too many states that may not necessarily be that viable. Either we can collapse them into those 6 geopolitical zones, into regions, and thereby reducing the cost of governance and make governance more efficient and efficacious to the average Nigerian. The second would be that if the expenses were curtailed, rather than having 6 or 7 state governments with so much overhead, you now have 1 instead. And you also now have economic viability, whereby internally the administrations of those 6 geopolitical states or regions or zones could be independent of the center. And the other element is that if some of the lists move from federal level to the states and local government levels, then what you would have is that there would not be justification for the federation to be getting, is it 43% or 45% of the federal allocation? In which case there would be more money that would actually go accrue to the lower units. In fact, I would like to see more going to local governments than even to states. And thereby what will happen is that at that local level, which is much closer to the average citizen, there would be effectiveness in execution of capital projects, true capital projects, not buying cars and calling it capital. So essentially, that would also have an effect on the democratic process. People are voting for the people they want to see enhance their livelihoods. I don't believe that is the case today, because politicians come in during elections, make all kinds of promises, and then they disappear into this powerful beings that become untouchables, so to speak, using an analogy of India, right? And the problem is that once you become so powerful and you have the absolute power, you would begin to do things that have nothing, absolutely nothing to do with the lives of the average people. And I see this as a conversation that hopefully will go all the way to those levels of discourse, rather than just the superficiality of whether it is Weke or whether it is Lagos that is making a claim. I think the conversation should be much broader and much deeper than what we have, what has been started. So I hope that we, as a nation, would realize that there is a much more deeper conversation around internally generated revenues at the lower levels, and also the allocation formula at federal and the federating units.
Okay, so let's try as much as we can to deepen our own conversation this morning. I mean, even beyond what we're discussing now. Still related, definitely. Earlier on, you said some states are not viable, really. And it begs the question, how can a state not be viable? I mean, what does that mean? I hear that a lot, that states are not viable. from time to time, I have this compendium of states and the natural resources they have. I mean, their strengths and the rest, some agriculture, some mineral resources, some, I mean, the list goes on and on, some tourism. So how can a state not be viable, really? Is it that the government is choosing not to make it viable, or, please, if you could explain.
Well, it's a combination of things. Number one, if natural resources were actually the key ingredient for viability, Nigeria would have been an extremely viable country. By that, I mean Nigerians would not be mired in poverty as we are right now. Oil was discovered since the 50s. And what has that given us? I'm now talking from the point of view of the average citizen. When you are selling anything crude, whether it is gold or silver, cocoa, coffee, tea, whatever it is, if you just pick it from the ground or pick it from a tree and go sell it, and then you go and import the refined products, you're never going to be viable. So essentially what that means is that there has to be the quality of leadership has to change. The leaders must actually look at how they can attract investments into their states or their regions or zones in such a manner that whatever is being produced in the state is, some value addition need to take place, 1, 2, or 3 steps of value addition. For example, I just recently saw Nigerian coffee in one store, but the other element is that chocolate is now being produced within the West Africa region and being sold. Now, if we continue on that trajectory, and that has nothing to do with governments, by the way, but if the governments create the necessary enabling environment and put the first potential investment, so to speak, they create that enabling environment, they make it so that the viability of those industries or businesses becomes strong, then any state, even if they don't have water to drink, may become viable. Viability of a sub-region or of a state depends on how creative and innovative the state actors are. Today, unfortunately, we do not have such leadership at the lower levels. We may have 1 or 2, but I don't believe that the 36 plus FCT are in that category, so to speak.
It's viable to the extent to which the leadership in the state wants it to be viable or is actively making it viable. I think that's quite instructive from what you have said. But on a final note now, so the conversation has been around the federal government will not get the 15% they used to get anymore, so states essentially own everything. Do you think for old time's sakes, if I could use that term, states should still remit something to the federal government if this, of course, goes through?
I think if the structure is properly done, the states or the zones need to be sending some things out, because we are copying a model. And if we're going to copy a model, we also need to customize it to our local needs. What I believe strongly is that at the center, they now have no need for certain things, but there are fundamental items that belong in the center. Defense, for example, external affairs, for example, and some key aspects of even the national economy, meaning the central banks and all of that. I wouldn't want to see state central banks, so to speak, where currencies are issued at the state level. I don't believe that is even feasible in this country. There would be rampant economic malfeasance all over the place. But at the, just as you have stated, there will be some level of, for example, certain states might have surplus and they may end up being the contributor to the general pool, so to speak. I mean, if we are to copy the US model, for example, New York every year contributes more than takes from the federal. And then you go to a southern state in the US, and they may tend to be actually net getting more from the federation than they send out. Some of the oil states like Alaska or similar states that produce oil in the US or natural resources, they tend to be the ones that are net surplus providers rather than takers. So essentially it is to balance the living standards. Even though if you go from state to state, the quality of life differs, but on average, they're basically similar. And if you want to achieve that, then fine. If not, what you would find is that within the country, you will find a lot of economic migrants moving from, say, a poor state, quote unquote, moving to seek opportunities in a richer state. And that may also dislocate public services in those states that we call successful in the short term.
Well,
so
who knows
at the end
if,
of the day,
who knows if this will eventually perhaps affect the way we conduct our elections. Maybe if a state is struggling, you could then say, well, look, we need people who are strong in economics to come up and fix the state and run the state. So states that were hitherto thought to be not viable, if someone is driving, piloting the affairs, you never can tell. So it's a going concern. So we'll keep our tabs on this one. And it certainly is an interesting one. We'll have to thank you very much indeed, Bukar Kyari, former chairman, NESG, for your perspective today.
Thank you, Chamberlain.
All right, well, back in a moment, we'll turn our attention to a legal matter. Don't go away.
Now, Section 31, subsection 5, it says that if any person has a problem, has any reasonable ground to complain about the submission of list of candidates and the affidavit they submit, that person may file an action to challenge that in a high court of the state, in a federal high court, or in the high court of the federal capital territory. Meaning that there is no streamlining. So anybody can go to any high court of any state. Section 85, subsection 9, says that if the nomination of a candidate is submitted and you disagree with that there's a problem with that, you are an aspirant, you can also approach any high court of the state, any federal high court, or any high court of the federal capital territory. That's how it is worded. So if you look at those provisions, you agree with me that it's possible that while you are talking about the same course of action, depending on how lawyers, bring the name of the parties, whether INEC will be the first party or whatever, or the first defender and all that, you can go to any state and file an action. And that's what is being done right now. So in a sense, you may say that, yes, the provisions of the law allow the exercise of jurisdiction by this court. But the point I'm making is that what we are seeing essentially, when you are having courts of coordinate or concurrent jurisdiction exercising powers over the same course of action, what you have is a quintessential, it is a classical abuse of court process and forum shopping, and it borders on ethical infractions. So the judiciary has a duty to rebuff politicians when they come with their deleterious briefs and cases and say, no, go away. Now, I know that there are two considerations here. One consideration is that a judicial officer, once a matter is presented, once he has jurisdiction, he is not expected to start moving out of the four corners of that case to start looking at what is going on outside. So, in a way, there's a little play of the ostrich here.
Oh, yes, indeed, Mr. Lai Babatunde, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, joins us next to weigh in on that matter. Good morning, sir. Thank you for coming on today.
Good morning, Chamberlain. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so this meeting that the CJN had with chief judges over indiscriminate granting of ex parte, do you think it's going to have the right kind of results that they intended?
Well, the expectation is that down the line it should have, to the extent that now it has gone beyond meeting those chief judges. The judges that are directly involved in the grant of those orders have now been asked to offer explanations. And I think to that extent, we should keep our fingers crossed.
But, you know, I mean, we see questions, several such that they wonder, does the CJN have the powers to discipline the state judge?
It's the NJC, actually, the National Judicial Council, of which is chairman. At the end of the day, a decision will have to be taken by the NJC, not the CJN as a person.
But now, when those judges give those experts, as it were, in the case of the state chief judge, aren't the judges vicariously liable for their matters? I mean, can the chief judges in the state be accountable for what the judge has done?
Well, you see, it's an interesting scenario. The point is that every judge is the master of his or her own court. Once you are assigned a case, you have a responsibility to decide the case one way or the other, and you are responsible for your decision. No other person will take responsibility for you. But the CJA of a state has administrative responsibilities in terms of assignment of cases and all of that. But except perhaps maybe if it happens that in the course of assigning cases, the CJA goes out of its way to interfere one way or the other. Otherwise, it's the judge that takes the case that will have to answer for himself.
You know, I came across a paper you delivered, and part of it, I believe, said that one major area of concern concerns the activities of some federal government agencies and their penchants to visit heads of federal courts soliciting for assistance on the disposal of their cases pending before the courts or to be filed. And clearly you had seen a trend, a dangerous trend with heads of courts. And this touches, I mean, this whole conversation touches at the heart of the judiciary. And I think, like you said, keeping our fingers crossed is quite important, because a lot of people are saying they're watching to see how this will play out, because whatever comes out of it would impact on the integrity of the judiciary, the trust that people have in the judiciary. And I just want to glean from your experience, because I know you've written a lot about, you know, court cases. How deep is this really? And I'm talking about when it comes to heads of courts. How much compromises have probably been made in the past? How much do we need to remedy this?
Well, you see, the point is this. If you look at the structure that we have, take the judiciary, all right? Amongst the three arms of government, the judiciary is the only body that regulates itself very strongly. And that's the truth, irrespective of whatever we perceive that is happening. There's a code of conduct for judicial officers, very strict one at that. In fact, it goes into the minutest detail of whether you can accept a gift from an acquaintance or not, including the family members of the judge. And the question is always put in your face. Look, this step that I want to take, how would the public perceive it? The entire stretch and gamut of the rules is about sustaining public confidence in the judiciary.
Absolutely.
Its integrity and impartiality. Now, having said that, you realize that in every system, the judiciary does not function on its own, all by itself. There are other players in the field. And I think this is where sometimes we make the mistake. Because if you look at the discourse, even in recent development, it's about the lawyers and the judges. But there are players around the courts that they themselves have constituted problems to the courts. You have an emerging trend of people who regard themselves as super litigants. Super litigants. And they want to conduct their affairs as if they want to overwhelm the court. And some politicians are part of that group. Like the CGM mentioned, forum shopping from one state to the other, trying to select a court that will be favorable to their disposition. The National Assembly, for instance, is responsible for the budget of the judiciary. The judiciary does not budget by itself. It is what is allocated to them that they receive. By the rules of conduct for judges, they are supposed to be competent. They are supposed to be trained regularly to maintain that competence. But they must have a library to do that. If they don't have the money to build up and maintain an up-to-date library, the rules will just be there in the books. So what do you find? The law establishes an institute, National Judicial Institute, that is supposed to be responsible for the continuing education of the judges that we appoint. But how much funds do you allocate to them? Hold on. So you have these people who are agencies of government and all of that. They now begin to sponsor trainings. They begin to sponsor seminars. They begin to pay for all those things, which of course gives a wrong impression, because some of them are litigants. Some of the agencies are litigants. And then they begin to sponsor trainings for judges and pay for it. Now, these are things that can affect public confidence in the judiciary, because if, for instance, you find an agency that is a party in a suit and is organizing a conference or a seminar or a training for judges, and you get to read in the papers or you watch on the television, you'll be shocked. That how can this be? How can a party in a case organize a training for judges? But that is because somebody has failed in his duties somewhere. The both arms of National Assembly, they have a judiciary committee. I don't think they need to be told that.
So while this might affect the perception of the public, seeing all that, the way things are done, should this affect the decisions of the judges? Are you saying these powers are superior to the judges? Yes, we understand public perception. But when the chips are down, when the cases are in court, should that affect the disposition of the judges naturally?
No. You see, the point is this. There are several factors that goes into deciding a case. Even for us as lawyers, we have comprehensive rules of professional conduct that guide us. The judge has a perception of what has been presented to him. And you realize that every judge will take a case based on the facts that are before him, not the facts before another person. So when, for instance, you as a member of the public, you are aware of other facts that have taken place elsewhere, but those facts are not in the docket before the judge. Of course, when he gives his judgment, you will be alarmed.
Is that going to change now, given the directive of the CGN having had this meeting?
I didn't get that.
They need to be abreast of what's going on in other jurisdictions.
Again, look, take for instance the Court of Appeal. The Court of Appeal is one with several divisions. What is the level of infrastructure that the Court of Appeal has as at today, that even every judicial division knows what is being decided in another judicial division real time? So when the CJN says it should keep abreast of whatever is happening, my understanding of it is this. Look, without prejudice to whatever is going to happen at the end of the day, those who have responsibility to do that. But for the purpose of our discussion, you have something going on in a political party in Anambra State, all right? And somebody goes to Jigawa, as it has happened, or goes to Kwara or Imo or whatever, and he files a case. You know, you want to be circumspect. You want to ask yourself, my friend, how did you travel to this place? How did you travel? How did you travel to this place? Something that happened in Imo State in a political party. You are here in Kano. I mean, those are the kind of things. And to be honest, some of the provisions of the rules, they are called with common sense. You don't have to be an SAN, a judge or whatever. I mean, commonsensically to want to, my friend, how did you travel here? This is something that happened in Igbo, I Kano, yeah. So I think that is kind of thing that the
So
CJ...
they also have asked those questions.
Look, one will expect that there are certain things that are so basic. More so when you have the decision of the courts that have already said, look, if this thing is happening in another jurisdiction and they come to your court, stay away from it. Let them go back to where that is happening. And there are things that happen that naturally it will raise questions. And I think that is why the agency is asking questions. So say, look, this looks strange. Can you tell us why you got yourself involved in this kind of thing?
But can this matter really be addressed without addressing the way judges are appointed?
Well, partly. For instance, part of the comments that I read is that the CJ did mention from the newspaper accounts that more experienced judges should take some of these political cases and all of that. There is no doubt that the process for the appointment of judges needs to be thoroughly examined. There is no doubt about that. Because the judicial appointment cannot be a matter of patronage. It ought not to be. Because look, a judge has the power of life and death. If a judge makes an order that I order that you be hung by the neck until you are dead, may God have mercy on your soul. Unless you succeed on appeal, that is it. Or the governor refuses to sign your warrant, you are dead. So to give such a power to a person, the person must be well tested in knowledge, in learning, in integrity. Because look, we donate. Look, we are privileged people, and that is why I think when things happen, the public, they are so interested. Because look, we have an arm of the government that is dominated by lawyers. If you see another person in that temple that where we serve, they are subordinates. They are just people that you ask to go and do one thing or the other. Unlike other places where you have a mixed bag of people. So for you to populate that very strong and powerful institution, you need to have the right set of people to do that. Because the power is enormous. The power is enormous. And that is why the Code of Conduct, for instance, for judges, says that, look, we recognize the fact that this power can be abused. It can be abused. Make sure you don't abuse the power by the grant of ex parte orders indiscriminately. Because they also recognize that the power is there, that it can be abused. But before you give such power to people, I think they need to be properly examined and tested. Not because, oh, Mr. X is from one local government, oh, we don't have anybody from a local government that has been a judge before. You must ensure that we also are represented, all kinds of considerations that don't really...
Is that what happens now?
Well, some people have complained. Some people have complained that, look, the way some people get appointed and all of that, there's a need to... Look, every process needs to be fine-tuned. No matter how perfect you think a system is, the moment you allow it to remain dormant the way it is, decay may set in. Every process requires you need to be reviewed continually.
I wonder how far back, pardon me, we have to go into this process, because they essentially picked from a pool, right? But I mean, they didn't just...
How did they pick from a pool?
I'm just saying, they essentially picked from a pool. I mean, they select from the people existent already. They don't bring anybody from Mars to become judges.
Yeah, lawyers.
So let me now go back to, I mean, these lawyers had to go to law school, right?
Yes.
They had to, they had to go through university, then law school,
yes.
Then they had to, they were parts of MBA, as it were. So the question is, do we have to go that far back as well? Because that will question the whole process that brought them to that point where they were then selected as judges.
Look, it's like when some people complain and they say, oh, we have issues with the quality of graduates, all right? Others will say, look, why are you talking about graduates? Go to the primary school, secondary school, and examine what has been going on up to the university level. But don't forget, if thousands of lawyers qualified and have got to the bar, few will be chosen. Very few will be chosen to go to the bench. The bench is not a free-for-all kind of thing. No, it's not. Look, if you check in the country today, check the number of judges that we have and justices. It's just a handful. So it's a special breed of people that you have to select painstakingly to do an onerous job. I just showed you now. You are a judge. You now, your wife, your children, your relations, even for them to collect a gift from an acquaintance, they have to think, what effect would this have on Chamberlain that is a judge? How many families have to go through that? I mean, that shows you how delicate and demanding the job is, which is the reason why we accord them a lot of respect. That's why when the judge enters into the court, everybody stands up. Whatever the judge says, we keep answering, my lord. Because it's enormous sacrifice.
So you sound like the process is, fail-proof, as it were. I mean, this process is the best of the best. So how
No. You have to understand this. I made this point. There is no process that is 100% foolproof. Look, take for instance, in some states, if the governor is the governor that interferes with everything, the chief judge will not find it easy to function.
But the chief judge is picked from the best of the best. So that's the test of integrity.
Look,
you have to face things.
You need to understand our system. Take for instance now, NJC, a body that has been established with powers to regulate the appointment and discipline of judges. If they believe that a judge in a particular state has not done well and ought to be dismissed, what would they do? They will take their decision and recommend to the governor. If the governor decides to keep the file on his table, the NJC will not call a press conference because of that. Now, most people will go thinking that, even that case, after 20 years now, nothing has happened. Though. But the governor that has done it is gone. Another governor has come, the file is still on his table. So you discover that the way our structure works, there are certain bottlenecks that you need to look very closely for you to see where those bottlenecks are. Like I said, even in the appointment of judges, if you have an overbearing governor in a state, if the CJ makes a short list of people that he thinks are competent to do the job, the governor can find a way to frustrate that process. Look, if you want to appoint a judge, you have to provide a court. You have to provide his residence. You have to provide an official car and do some other things. If you have an overbearing judge, a governor, he will tell you, my lord, sorry, the budget can't accommodate this in this year. Because even if you want to appoint, there will be no court. There is no courtroom. What would the CJ do?
So
if the governor is overbearing and he says, my lord, these local government people, they are complaining to me. They don't have, they say they are not represented. And the CJ says, Your Excellency, that's not the way we appoint people. No, we don't do that here. We don't do that here. They say, okay. The only problem is that there's no money now. So when you talk about independence of the judiciary, things work like a network.
So is that an excuse for the judge to compromise?
Hold on. At a point in time in this country, the courts were shut down for about 3 months over independence of the judiciary and control of their funds. These are part of the problem. But the CJ, would the CJ go to NTA to say, my governor is overbearing? No, he will quietly go back to his office and call his fellow judges and say, there is a problem. It appears we will not be able to appoint anybody this year. Then when that doesn't happen, they don't have enough manpower to take the cases. The cases will pile up. The public will feel the impact and complain about delay in justice administration. But there is somebody in government house that is causing the problem. So if we want to solve a problem, we need to look at it in a holistic manner. Even, look, I talk of super litigants and politicians. There are politicians that contested elections and they were found to have forged documents. And the Supreme Court, in their judgment, recommended that they should be prosecuted. But nobody prosecuted them. Nobody. I mean, how far can you go? You write it in the judgment that this fellow has forged certain documents, and the highest court of the land and recommends that such people should be prosecuted, and nothing happens to them.
But if, granted, I mean, those challenges need to be addressed, but if the disciplinary procedure were really strong and active, in spite of all these challenges, wouldn't the lawyers or the judges themselves feel, wait a minute, even though, yes, politically they may have my back, but my profession will not find it funny? Won't that help?
Look, certainly it will help. And that is why many of us are hoping and we look forward to this process that the CJN has started, which is in the public space, that we see to the final conclusion. Just as the NBA has made a statement, and we are looking forward to the NBA taking its own step too, which I believe the NBA will do. So let's wait and see how this process plays out. It is important. Look, yes, it is important that the rules are enforced. It is important that the rules are enforced.
Can the judge be suspended or sacked?
A judge can be dismissed, and some have been dismissed before. And unfortunately, you see, one of the cases that seem to give a bad name to the judiciary are political cases. Most of the judges that have been dismissed, either for corruption or whatever, they are election petition-related cases. And if you ask me, quite honestly, I am one of the lawyers. I don't feel comfortable with the way the National Assembly has dragged the courts neck deep into political issues. I'm not comfortable with it, and many lawyers are not.
Which part? How?
Look, at a time in this country, the law was that if you have internal issues within the party, like nomination of candidates and all of that, the court will never get involved. Never. The court will regard it as your internal affair and as a political issue. Never. And there are cases that the Supreme Court have decided. In fact, you will remember that there was a case in which a High Court judge in Abuja then took a matter that has to do with the governorship candidate of ANPP then in Jigawa State. And the Supreme Court came hard on the judge. In fact, they described his conduct as reckless. Okay. When I read the language that the CJN used, you know, in what was in the book, I said, then the court said, look, this behavior is reckless. Besides, you are not supposed to go and deal with internal affairs of a political party. Then suddenly, the National Assembly began to expand it to say if somebody has not been allowed to contest election, or they removed his name and all of that after giving his name to INEC, if there is no cogent and verifiable reason, the court should look at it. Then gradually they expanded it. If somebody has filed papers with INEC and anybody knows that the papers are not correct or they are forged, they can go to court. So they began to expand, all because they are unable to manage their own affairs. So they felt that, let's push it to the courts. And you now find the courts inundated with all kinds of cases. You know, in 2018, this Professor Yakubu, he was complaining bitterly. He went to see the then CJN, and he said, in one political party, they were fighting over the chairmanship of the party, like it happens in PDP now. They were fighting over the chairmanship, and in the space of, I think, 3 months, there were 6 conflicting orders of courts of coordinate jurisdiction. 6. That was, he went to see the CJN, I think, 17th January or so, in 2018. Is it different from what we are witnessing now?
Professor Jega had the same problem too. Jega during his time as ANEC chairman, so, and then it subsisted.
So I think the idea of taking the court deeper and deeper, and my belief is this, and some of our colleagues have expressed this view, and I share that view with them. If the system had been allowed to run, and you keep the court, because why do you want to give the court a bad name? And you guys, you don't seem to look. You want to have your way at all costs, which is why you forum shop, you any way that you can have it done.
But speaking about that forum shopping,
yes,
we understand that it is senior lawyers who are even involved in this. Because when the CJN says, well, more qualified judges should handle that.
Wait for what the NBA will do before you know who are those that are involved. Those, it's very easy to say senior lawyers, senior judges. These things are just...
So you know senior lawyers were not involved, or they were involved?
I wouldn't know. But what I can tell you is that, look, only after the CJ met with those chief judges, I think at the time it was 6 initially. Then another one was trying to make let's wait for what the NBA will do.
Is the NBA likely to publish names?
Wait for what the NBA will do. NBA has issued a statement that can assure you that it won't end at that. I believe that it won't end at that. But the point I'm making about this, you remember Peter Obi? Peter Obi was in a political party then, I think PDP. They had issues with his nomination, and he was edged out. Eventually, he crossed over to another party, and he was elected governor. Some have, expressed the view that if politicians continue to manipulate their internal process and they don't allow the right candidates to emerge, at the end of the day, they will be the losers, and that will straighten them out. Unless those people, it's only a person that is, let me not use very strong words on that. It's only a person who doesn't know what he's doing that will continue to repeat a process that is not profitable to you. And I think if we had allowed that process to go ahead truly, I believe all this kind of thing we find ourselves, because you get all kinds of cases now under the guise of pre-elections, disputes, and all of that. And even INEC, that is supposed to statutorily regulate elections, they are overwhelmed. I mean, how can we make ourselves a laughing stock? You look at INEC notice board. They say today, Chamberlain is the candidate for party in the morning. In the afternoon, they say it's now 10:30. By 5 o'clock in the evening, all by court. No, I mean, what kind of democracy are we trying to practice?
So you have said that courts should try as much as possible to stay away from...
It's the National Assembly that should do that.
Exactly, because it's in the law already. So I imagine that... They should limit, because look, what is this democracy? The democracy is the active participation of the people. The people should not become onlookers in their own events. So you're saying until the National Assembly does something, this will continue?
Sorry?
Until the National Assembly changes the law or repeals those laws, this will continue?
Well, I'm afraid that some aspect of it, certainly, because if you talk of multiplicity of suits, the registry of the court is open to accept court process. Even if you bring 1,000 court process, will the registry tell you to take it away? They cannot. I mean, they cannot. They cannot. If you say too many cases, of course, they have a right to, they will bring the cases. The registry will accept the cases. But the National Assembly can plug that hole, which I think they open for their own selfish benefit, to the detriment of the judicial process. Look, the people are the determinants of those who should get elected or not elected. They have put in place a process that has made them onlookers in their own event. It is wrong. It is wrong. Because, look, why will you at every turn, you are waiting on whom the court says is your councillor, is chairman, is an aspirant, is not aspirant, is this. No, I think that's too much. I think that's too much. The National Assembly should please, they should go and take a look at it. If they thought they were trying to solve a problem, they have tried it for quite a while, and it's not working. It's not working. That is one aspect of our process that has given the judiciary and the legal profession a bad name for no just cause. For no just cause. Everyone wants to file a case and get a court order. And you see all kinds of court orders flying all over the place.
So from the look of things now, given the meeting and what we expect from the NBA, you think that there will be no such case repeating itself, one judge in one jurisdiction, given this kind of order?
Jabali, I can't say that. And I'll tell you why. In 1993, that's many years down the line, there was a judge in Abuja. She's late now. May her soul rest in peace. You remember how the court intervened and gave an order that truncated the process. And several other cases came up. And the then military president used that as an excuse to say, we want to save the judiciary from itself. That was what he said. Mm-hmm. I remember. He said, because you see, the judiciary has become like a scapegoat. He says, oh, we want to save the judiciary from itself. So to stop all this process, even though the judiciary was struggling then to empanel a panel of justices to resolve all these conflicts, but they cashed in on those orders and said, we are going to cancel this process of election. So if we had this problem in 1993, and instead of abating, it's escalating.
Oh dear.
So something worries me about the way we solve problems in our part of the world, and I don't know why. You bring a solution, you want to solve a problem. The solution ends up becoming worse than the problem that you are trying. Yeah. But I believe that, again, there is a bit of attitudinal disposition to the way we go about it. Especially our politicians, this way, we must get something at all costs and all of that, and cause a lot of disaffection and problem in the system. And if the idea is that you want to serve the people, for God's sake, if they don't want you, they don't want you. If they want you, they want you.
All right, we'll hope that all of these measures, particularly seeing the process play out, will at least, if not eliminate it, reduce it to the barest minimum.
Yeah, but if the enforcement of the rules goes on as this CGN has given the clear signal, and it is consistent and swift,
then there might be some.
If it is consistent and swift, I think we begin to make progress.
All right. Well, thank you very much indeed for coming on, Mr. Lai Babatunde, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. Well, let's take some messages. I think you have one or two of them now.
Oh, yes, a lot actually. But let's see how many we can run through. Olakunjo Oladele is first with this conflicting court orders mail. If there are two or more conflicting court orders from courts of coordinate jurisdiction, the first must become the main order until a higher court decides. The second or third ought not to have been granted or executed by the affected parties. There is a serious need to have a rethink of how our judicial system functions.
Well, Alex switches to the FIRS VAT matter, saying the VAT issue and the ensuing debate is a great step to fiscal autonomy. This should, however, be taken to the local government areas also. The revenue generated at the various LGAs and VAT there should be kept there, managed by the LGA chairpersons and not collected by the various state governments. Napa?
Ogonna Elenwoke has this one also on VAT, just to say that we got a deluge of mails on that one. It says the law abhors a vacuum. There is no such thing as putting the operation of a law in abeyance pending the outcome of the appeals up until the Supreme Court. The law is that the status quo at any time remains during the litigation process. As at today, the status quo is that the states are to collect tax where they have enacted the law to do so, and until an appellate court rules otherwise, that remains the position. Withholding remission of collected taxes is criminal, by the way, most definitely not under the excuse of litigation as to the proper collecting authority.
Interesting. So no excuses there. Festus Akimboyewa, still on VAT collection, which is clearly a big deal. The collection of VAT by River State government is the beginning of the restructure Nigerians are crying for, and it may change the way VAT and other taxes operate in our dear country. River State government's action may be political. It is desirable, but I see NAS intervening by way of new legislation. Fingers crossed.
All right, Igbanyosa, Professor Naina, thank you all for your messages. So that is it today. We'll see you next time. I'm Chamberlain Uso.
I'm Kayode Okikiolu.
And I'm Mal Pelgun, so thank you for watching.